The evening sun hung low, casting a warm golden glow over the crowded slum. The air was thick with the mingling scents of fried street food, open drains, and the sweat of a long day. Michael walked briskly, his leather satchel slung over his shoulder, the weight of his office work dragging behind him. He had taken this shortcut only a handful of times, and each time, he found himself both fascinated and troubled by the bustling life around him. Today, however, something stopped him in his tracks. Amid the cacophony of vendors calling out their wares and the occasional honk of passing bicycles, a small group of children caught his eye. They were gathered under a makeshift shelter, a few wooden planks propped against the crumbling wall of a nearby shop. At the center of the group sat a boy, no older than 10, holding a tattered, dog-eared book. His voice, steady and clear, carried over the din as he read aloud. The younger children, some barefoot and others wearing mismatched clothes, listened intently, their eyes wide with wonder. Michael stepped closer, his curiosity piqued. "What are you reading?" Michael asked softly, crouching to meet the boy's gaze. The boy looked up, startled but not afraid. "It's a story about a boy who becomes a hero," he said, holding up the book. The cover was faded, its title barely legible. "I found it in the trash. It's my favorite." "Why aren't you in school?" Michael asked, though he already suspected the answer. The boy shrugged, his small shoulders sagging under an invisible weight. "We can't afford it. Mama says school is too expensive. But I want to learn, so I read this to the little ones." He gestured to the children around him, who smiled shyly at Michael. Michael's throat tightened. He glanced around and noticed others watching, a woman selling vegetables, an older man mending shoes, a teenager balancing a tray of snacks on his head. The scene felt heavy with untold stories, each life marked by struggles Michael could hardly imagine. "Do you want to go to school?" he asked the boy. The child's face lit up, a mixture of hope and disbelief. "Yes," he said simply, his voice firm despite the uncertainty in his eyes. Michael nodded, standing up and looking around again. The slum, chaotic and full of life, seemed to shift in his mind's eye. He had always seen it as a place of poverty, a world apart from his own. But now it was something else, a place where dreams quietly persisted, waiting for a chance to grow. "I'll see what I can do," Michael murmured to himself as he walked away. The boy's voice reading the story faded behind him, but the image of those eager, hopeful faces stayed with him, etched into his mind like a promise. Michael sat at his small dining table that night, a cup of tea cooling beside an open notebook. He couldn't shake the memory of the boy and his friends, their faces so full of yearning. He began scribbling ideas, his handwriting messy with excitement. What if there was a school right there in the slum? He thought aloud. It didn't have to be anything fancy, just a place where the children could learn. He picked up his phone and called Sarah, his best friend and a teacher. "A free school?" Sarah repeated, her voice tinged with surprise. "That's a big dream, Michael." "I know," Michael admitted. "But someone has to start. Those kids have nothing. If we don't help them, who will?" Sarah was silent for a moment. "Okay," she said finally. "I'm in. Let's start by making a list of what you'll need: books, a space, supplies. We can rally some friends to help." Michael felt a surge of gratitude. With Sarah's encouragement, the idea no longer felt impossible. They spent hours that night brainstorming, their conversation filled with hope and determination. As Michael hung up, he glanced at his notebook, now full of plans. For the first time, he saw the faint outlines of a path forward. The following weekend, Michael gathered a small group of friends and family in his apartment. Sarah stood at his side, holding a whiteboard as he spoke. "We all know how important education is," Michael began. "But for many children in this city, it's a distant dream. I want to change that, starting with a school in the slum. It won't be easy, but I believe we can do it together." The group exchanged glances. Some nodded, inspired by his passion. Others looked skeptical. "You'll need money," his uncle said. "A lot of it." "I know," Michael replied. "But I'm starting small. We can teach under a tree if we have to. I just need your help to get the basics: books, notebooks, pencils. Anything you can spare. Slowly, hands began to rise. One friend offered a box of unused textbooks. Another promised to spread the word. Even his uncle handed over a few bills, muttering, "For the kids." Buoyed by their support, Michael took his first concrete step the next day. He returned to the slum with Sarah, carrying a bag of supplies. The children greeted him with wide eyes and shy smiles. "Today, we're going to learn some letters," Michael announced, pulling out a large chalkboard he had borrowed. Under the shade of a tree, he began their first lesson. The children were eager, their enthusiasm infectious. Word spread quickly, and by the end of the week, the group had doubled in size. Michael knew he couldn't stop now. Michael's confidence grew as the weeks passed, but so did the challenges. The tree provided shade, but rain would soon make outdoor lessons impossible. They needed a real space. Michael and Sarah drafted letters to local businesses, charities, and community leaders, explaining their mission. They spent hours delivering them in person, hoping to secure donations. Rejections came fast and often. "We're not in a position to help," one manager said bluntly. Another suggested, "Try a bigger organization." Discouraged but determined, Michael kept pushing. Finally, a breakthrough came when a small stationery shop owner, impressed by Michael's persistence, donated a stack of notebooks and pencils. "You remind me of my father," the owner said, handing over the supplies. "He always said education could change a person's life." Around the same time, a local charity pledged a modest grant. Michael also met Mr. Raj, a retired builder who had overheard one of his pitches. "I like what you're doing," Mr. Raj said. "If you ever find a place to build, I'll help." Encouraged by these small victories, Michael's vision began to take shape. He realized that every bit of support, no matter how small, was a step closer to the school he had promised the children. Michael's search for a suitable location led him back to the slum, where he identified a vacant lot cluttered with debris. It was centrally located and large enough to build a modest structure, but the lot had a problem. It belonged to a private landowner who wasn't eager to part with it. Michael arranged a meeting with the owner, a middle-aged man named Mr. Dinesh. "A school for slum kids?" Mr. Dinesh asked skeptically, leaning back in his chair. "That's noble, but I have plans for that land. I'm looking to sell it to developers." "Please, Mr. Dinesh," Michael pleaded. "These children have nowhere else to go. If you lease it to us, we'll pay a fair amount, and you'd be helping hundreds of families." Weeks of negotiations followed. Michael enlisted the support of a local journalist, who published an article highlighting the project and the potential impact on the community. Parents in the slums signed a petition, showing their willingness to contribute whatever they could, even if it was just labor. Eventually, Mr. Dinesh relented. "Fine," he said with a sigh. "I'll lease you the land at a discounted rate. But don't make me regret this." Michael walked out of the meeting exhausted but elated. He had secured the foundation, literally, for his dream. Construction began under the watchful eye of Mr. Raj, who volunteered his time and expertise. The community came together in an extraordinary display of solidarity. Fathers brought hammers and nails, mothers carried bricks and mixed cement, even the children pitched in, hauling small tools and cheering on the workers. Despite the progress, challenges arose. Funds ran low midway through construction, forcing Michael to stretch every rupee. One rainy afternoon, work came to a halt when a supplier demanded payment Michael didn't yet have. "It's okay," Mr. Raj reassured him. "These things happen. We'll manage somehow." True to his word, Mr. Raj rallied other retirees from his old construction crew, convincing them to donate materials and labor. Slowly but surely, the building began to take shape, a modest structure with 2 classrooms, a small library, and a playground that the children had already claimed as their own. When the walls were painted and the roof secured, Michael stood in the middle of the newly built school, overwhelmed by what they had accomplished. The journey wasn't over, but for the first time, he saw the finish line. Just as the project seemed to be on track, disaster struck. A major donor withdrew their promised funds, citing financial difficulties. The news hit Michael like a punch to the gut. Without the money, they couldn't buy desks or chairs for the classrooms, or pay for basic utilities. For the first time, doubt crept into Michael's heart. He sat on the floor of the unfinished school, staring at the blank chalkboards. "What if I've failed them?" he whispered to Sarah, who had come to check on him. "You haven't failed," Sarah said firmly. "You've done something incredible already. Now we just need to find another way." Inspired by her words, Michael organized a community fundraiser. They held the event in the slum, with children performing skits and songs they had learned during Michael's informal lessons. Parents cooked and sold food, while Sarah set up a booth showcasing the school's progress. The event drew a large crowd, including a few local philanthropists. By the end of the day, they had raised just enough to keep the project alive. Michael stood in front of the crowd, his voice thick with emotion. "This school isn't just mine," he said. "It's yours. It's for our children, and together, we've shown what we can achieve." The applause was thunderous, and Michael felt his resolve return. They weren't just building a school, they were building hope. The sun shone brightly on the school's opening day. A makeshift banner reading, "Welcome to Hope School," hung above the entrance, fluttering in the breeze. Families from the slum gathered in their finest clothes, their faces lit with pride and anticipation. The air buzzed with excitement as children ran around the playground, marveling at the swings and brightly painted walls. Michael stood on a small stage in front of the school, clutching a microphone. He scanned the crowd, seeing familiar faces, the boy who had first inspired him, Mr. Raj beaming with satisfaction, Sarah at his side, and countless others who had made this day possible. Clearing his throat, he began his speech. "This school is proof of what we can achieve when we come together. It's not just about education, it's about giving every child the chance to dream, to grow, and to create a better future. Thank you, all of you, for making this possible." As he cut the ribbon, the crowd erupted into cheers. Children rushed inside, exploring the classrooms with wide eyes, their laughter echoing through the halls. For Michael, it was a moment of profound joy, a dream realized not just for him but for the entire community. The first weeks at Hope School were a whirlwind. Michael quickly realized that running a school came with its own set of challenges. He juggled teaching, administrative tasks, and fundraising, often working late into the night. Some parents were initially skeptical about sending their children to school, fearing it would take away from household responsibilities or potential income. Michael visited homes, patiently explaining the long-term value of education. Gradually, more families became convinced, and the classrooms filled with eager students. There were also unforeseen hurdles. A water pipe burst one morning, flooding part of the schoolyard. Another day, a group of older boys from outside the community tried to vandalize the playground. Each obstacle tested Michael's resolve, but with the support of Sarah, Mr. Raj, and the community, he found solutions. One afternoon, as Michael walked through the school, he paused outside a classroom where the boy who had once read under the tree was now leading a small group in a reading exercise. The sight filled him with renewed determination. The challenges were real, but so were the rewards. Months later, the school was thriving. The classrooms hummed with activity as children learned to read, write, and solve math problems. A small library, stocked with donated books, became a favorite spot for many. Michael sat on a bench outside, watching the children during recess. Their laughter rang out across the yard, a sound that had come to symbolize hope and possibility. Sarah joined him, holding a folder of papers. "A donor reached out," she said. "They want to help expand the school. Maybe at another classroom, or even a science lab." Michael smiled, his heart swelling with gratitude. "It's amazing how far we've come," he said. "And it's only the beginning." As the bell rang and the children returned to their lessons, Michael stayed on the bench, reflecting. The journey had been harder than he ever imagined, but it had also been deeply fulfilling. The final line of the story echoed in his thoughts, as if carried on the breeze. Together, we can build a world where every child has a chance to dream.